Hello, welcome to the sixth episode of the D91 Labs Idea Series. Through this series, we intend to highlight a diverse range of ideas and innovations that aim to move the needle further on financial inclusion, as well as inspire the industry to build and serve financially and digitally underserved people of India. I am Vinit Kurre, Senior Research Fellow at D91 Labs, and I will be hosting the discussion today. Pension, both as an instrument of financial savings and as a means of old age income security, ought to be an important and necessary choice for every individual. In practice, however, that is not the case. In the early stage of employment, when one starts saving, retirement is often seen far from one's mind. In India, for the organized sector, it has mostly been the Provident Fund offered by the Employees Provident Fund organization, to which employers are also required to make a contribution. It does have a pension component for low-income contributors, the Employees Pension Scheme. In addition, insurance companies offer annuity-based pensions, and some mutual funds provide medium to long-term regular income schemes. All in all, though, these entities taken together still cater to a relatively small segment of the population, and this largely leaves out the huge unorganized sector in the country. Today, we have with us Kuldeep Parashar, founder and CEO of PensionBox. After working for 8 years as a product owner and consultant for the US retirement industry, he built PensionBox for India's pension space. PensionBox is a rapidly growing pension startup that aims to improve the way millions of Indians plan their retirement and save for old age. Founded by two brothers, PensionBox is now trusted by over 55,000 users and has close to 120 crore rupees worth of pension savings being tracked under the platform. PensionBox has also been backed by reputed investors in the VC space, such as 100x VC and Coup, and aims to become India Ka Pension app in the near future. Through this interview, we will discuss various aspects of the pension space in India and try to understand from Kuldeep how PensionBox is innovating with this oft-neglected product for the people of Bharat. Thank you so much for joining us, Kuldeep.
Thank you so much, Vinit, for having me. Great to have you here. Great to have talk about what we are building, and then we'll move forward from there.
Great. So let's dive straight into it then. So PensionBox is less than 2 years old. Please tell us about your journey into building a product in a market that has not yet seen much innovation, particularly using a digital-first media.
So yeah, I think 1.5 years old now. We started off last year when I quit my job with Fidelity Investments, and especially looking at, so it all started from COVID itself. COVID made us realize that savings are important. So when we started with a personal problem, we thought of our parents' retirement as a one thing, which is the Indian kids generally do. We never thought we'll build up a startup, to be very honest. We always thought it's something we never thought a problem at all. But when we started looking at our parents' retirement to be in the first place, then we got to know this is pretty common. This is pretty visible in the society. There's multiple examples to it where people are still working in their 60s, 70s, even in 80s in the society part. And then we started looking at, can we do something in the pension space on that part? That was one main thing where we started. But and then we, as soon as we dip deeper into the problem, and then we realized it's something which has to be digital first. I think the first thing that I did after resigning from my Fidelity Investments job was to do a pilot with a low income segment. So my hometown is Tondla. It's near Agra, between Agra and Firozabad is a city of glass. So there's a lot of glass workers there. And I got to do 100 people, glass workers kind of a workshop where we tell them about pension, how to save about it, total pension use and stuff. And that's how we started. So we started off saying lower income segment, we tested out our hands there. Then we realized that it has to be done digital first approach, a DIY kind of approach to start with, and then move forward and start say we can scale, and then we go back to that particular medium again. So 1.5 years, lot of twists and turns, quite a journey to something. I think every founder will go through something like that, right? But we started off from hometown, which is a very small 3-kilometer kind of a city. Like within 5 rupees, you can roam around the entire city. And then we kicked off from there with a simple thought that I want to build something which my parents might use, or I would use myself, so that when I get old, I should have some money. So that was a simple thought to start off with, and then we picked up from there. So, and the lesson we learned from the first pilot was made sure that the next thing that we do, the pivot that we do from little offline to entirely online, which gives us two very flexible things. First, your cost of building a product reduces. It's entirely tech savvy, so people can just download it, do a DIY kind of a platform. And second, you can actually do a lot with a smaller team. So even if you are just two people building a pension box, or you don't have a team of, let's say, 100 people or 200 people there to build something, a smaller team can work. So that's you need in the very beginning, and that's how we started off. So these are my thoughts. I think we started off, and I think in my generation, our generation, we always think about a lower income segment first. When you actually go into the business, then you realize that you have to make money first and do impact parallel to it. And so the fact first and the money part later on. So that was the key.
That's a very interesting story, Kuldeep. So, I mean, as somebody who has like a lot of experience with the retirement industry in the US, what do you see the key differences between how these products are viewed in the US versus, say, in India?
So So I'll tell you a story about Fidelity Investments. They came about 15 years back to India. Fidelity Investments is a pioneer in retirement industry in US. They manage about $6 trillion of retirement savings. It's like massive out there. So they thought the India is an emerging country, and obviously they'll retire. So why not go and start building something there? So they came 15 years back. They had losses within first 3-4 years. They can't figure it out. They sold that business to L&T in the next 3 or 4 years or so. And then they go back to the managing the US bit. So that gives an idea about whatever works in the US or UK or any other part of the world might not work here in India. We have to have our own solution, which can be inspired from them, but it has to have a flavor of India or a Bharat to it, saying that how do we look at retirement, right? So when I started looking at India as a space, obviously US, UK have much more mature system. UK have private pension players where you have, and because Britishers were here, so pension became a very common word used in India as well. If you go to US or you go to Japan, you'll see different products, but the core product remains the same. That you'll put in some money. That money is managed by a particular fund manager. It can be a regulatory or it can be a private player, and then you get some payouts at the end of the day on that part. So UK much more mature system. Very people are very conservative about their retirement. They look forward towards their retirement. That has happened already. So there's one. I would recommend there's a one video, or I say there's recordings, which is Money Explained on Netflix. It talks about retirement, which has already happened in the developed part. But India is still emerging. Like we got independence later. We are still emerging on the workforce side of it. We're still emerging on other side of it as well, right? So we picked up saying that, okay, what has already worked on the developed side, let's just figure out what has already worked and let's build something which is India space. So India is always about family values. India, like my kids will be my retirement plan was the original retirement plan, right? My grandfather did everything for the kids. My father did for us. And things, that's how it used to be. That's a traditional retirement planning in India. But if you look at a very, approach, which is US, the culture is very different. So the same culture won't work here. You have to figure out a midway, saying that you also care about your kids and you also care about your retirement. It's just not like you let go of your kids at 18 and, don't care about it. And then you just look at yourself. That doesn't work in India. So we looked at India and then looked at what values we can bring in together and then build something. So that was one major difference. The mindset is something which is very different in India when it comes to retirement. It has to be parallel to it or at least adjacent to the other goals which people might have, like kids, education or something like that. So that was one key thing. Second, we knew that it has to be platform first. It has to be DIY. Like people building, people realizing that retirement is a socially connected problem. Like I see a person who's not very taken care, and then I connect myself saying that I don't want to do that to myself, right? So I connect very well to the people who are already there and they are not treated well, or they do not have enough pension saving or support. I don't want to. I want to take care. So we relate to each other. So there's a generational learning started in India. Like 4 or 5 years back, we always look up to others and then look at boss. I want to fix this up. So a couple of things which picked up, and that's how we position ourselves, saying that this is how we want to pick up. So these are the 2 or 3 things which Definitely I learned, but I also learned that the US things won't work the straightforward way in India.
Right. I mean, so I think just alluding to the unique characteristics of India, I mean, also referring to a RBI report on household finance, which highlighted that Indian households hold a high proportion of their wealth in largely illiquid assets,
Yeah.
large real estate or gold, that are then mortgaged to borrow later on in life. So, how do you see this allocation being shifted to more liquid forms of wealth that may be more easily accessible during need in old age?
So I think that is already happening. Like, to be honest, like you don't need a RBI report to look at the data. Like you can look at a family or a traditional Indian family, and you will see that father figure, who's the father of the family, let's say in their 50s or 60s or 70s, they did two major things. They built a house, which everyone in their generation did. Even they had a house, they built a house, and then they made sure that kids are educated on that part, right? So these were the two things. So most of the things which were there, right, they were in a illiquid form. So they built a house was the wealth. They bought a land was a wealth which is not liquid enough, right? But if you look at the 30s population right now or a 20s population, they have much more liquid wealth compared to the people who have in 40s, 50s, and 60s. So the category wise, if you look at, if you take a survey of people in 50s and 60s and 70s, they have much more illiquid wealth. But if you go deeper, like let's say 30s, 20s, or let's say 40s, you'll see a drop in that already. And these are the guys who will become 30s and 40s forward, right? So they will carry the liquid form of or the flexibility to withdraw anytime kind of a way forward as well. So that's a pickup trend. Having a illiquid wealth is not a pickup trend. It's not an upward trend. It's a downward trend. So going forward, I feel it will pick up eventually. People will look at the same way, and it's happening already on that part. And household thing, people will also the people who are already there, let's say 60s and 70s, and they have a house for a pension or retirement to work, they have to figure out a way to make that leap. So, for example, I built a house. Let's say I'm in my 60s, right? And I don't have an income flow, but I still have to live by on a day-to-day expenses. So I have to figure out a way where I can liquidate some of my assets and then build a recurring income having hold of liquid and illiquid balance. So it has to be there, and that has to be built across. And that is one of the ways is pension. Like you sold off a land and then you put those money to annuities, and every month on month you have some income coming up. So that is one flow where you converted your illiquid wealth to a liquid wealth overall. So that is happening, and I think that's a growing trend, and it will pick up for sure.
Right. So, I mean, the active retirement planning in India is often seen from the lens of more government mandated approaches, such as perhaps the Employee Provident Fund and Employee Pension Scheme, or as a way of tax saving, as seen in the case of the NPS more recently. So, how is Pension Box doing things differently, would you say?
So so we are not changing the existing mindset of the people. We're not saying, stop that and do this. It's like whatever you're doing, let's make it better. So if you have PF, can we help you build it better on the red kit, track it down, know how much it will be? Is there a gap in your savings or not? So people are divided into two parts. One who will do very conservatively, will have government backed. They like that pension is government backed. It's not in the hand of a private player who might have trust issues in the long run. So they like that trust part with the government more, or a PFRDA or regulator more than compared to a private player. A new guy comes in and say. So we got the approval, started working with the regulator and see that can we build something to simplify the existing thought process there. And that's one thing which we started building. Second is the people in their 30s, right? Or people picking up on that late 20s, they have a different mindset. So they want to control their wealth themselves. So they do not want to give government the authority, or they do not look for the same trades in a product which 40s or 50s might look, or the people segment might look, right? So they might want to retire early. And for that, they might want to go just do, stocks and, mutual funds, and they want to manage that themselves. So making that happen is one thing which is entirely missing from the industry. So and again, that's upward trend. So pension box is built in a form of picking up those upward instead of the downward trends, right? So early retirement kick is a upward trend. So that's not going to go down. That's going to go up. Like more and more people wants to retire early. more and more people will look at that part, right? So it's an upward trend. Right now, it might be 10 out of 2 people, but when you pick up that, at the end of the day, you will grow with the market itself. So that is one thing. But I do agree that there are some, and just to bifurcate the retirement savings part as well, right? So in India, people, what they do is till they want to save tax, they'll save up in PPF, EPF, and NPS, right? After that, once that bucket is full, then you look forward to, let's say, other retirement savings, which can give you much more returns or a short term returns. So majority of the people have a limited thinking saying that I'll save till 2 lakhs here, which knowingly or unknowingly become your pension savings, right? And then afterwards, then you look for other products, for a better returns or something, which is not tax savings. So that's a thought process here, and that's a very big market to cater to. Not every one of those guys are investing in mutual funds. So mutual fund industry is still limited to a certain set of people. But there are people who just save tax and go home with the money. And that market is much, much bigger than the other guys who are investing in mutual funds. And that's a reality. Like that's how we do not look at that. But only 30 to 40 million people are actively engaged in the market on that part. But there are people who are just conservatively just save tax and then go home. That's it. And in that particular 2 lakh bucket, you can actually help them save better. So that is how Prevention Box is positioned and build it in a way.
Right. So, Kuldeep, you also alluded to the regulator. I mean, what role do you see the regulator having in spurring more innovations in this space?
So FRDA is the regulator of pension space. They are Pension Fund Regulatory and Development Authority. They are the youngest regulator. We can call them up the youngest one because everyone else has been there since ages, right? And they are the younger one who came just and started building the pension space. There are two things which are they are very good at. I think they're very aggressive. They're very open to ideas, even though my personal experience, because I didn't knew anyone in the pension space. So I walked to pension PFRDA office, you know, at the reception, called up saying that I want to talk to someone in the retirement, regulatory space. And then the guard said, Mohit sir. So I told yes, Mohit sir. So then I talked to Mohit sir and Mohit sir called me up. I met him. So very, very passionate about building that pension space. They know the problem, what they're building towards, and they're very aggressive towards making those changes in the product whenever needed. So overall regulatory is needed as they're doing right now, and more support towards people who are like us, like underdogs, right? Like who started from nothing. They do not come up with any contacts as such. They basically trying to figure out what can be built instead of people who are already players, like, big firms. So regulator plays a does important role saying that how can we, without 3 years of financial statements or any other background, startups comes and build something in the pension space. But I think it's very progressive. What they are doing is quite good. And I think there's a lot to be done. So there's a new PFRDA 2022 bill coming in parliament, which might propose more changes. So there's a push from government because at the end of the day, to be honest, knows you, me, everyone, right? By the time 2050 comes, we will have 34 crore people above the age group of 65. If these guys do not have their own savings, government have to support them. And that is a huge part of GDP just going towards pension support. So they have to figure out a way where people save towards themselves so that government can actually focus on something else. Otherwise, your entire, like a big chunk of GDP will go towards budget, will go towards just the pension savings. So they know that there's gonna be a massive problem. There's a crisis coming up, and they're just gearing it up. So that's how the regulator will move things faster, make it much larger, and just not about this whole mutual fund space, but I think much more bigger than that. Covers all the use cases that could be. So these are the things my 2 cents.
Right. That's a fascinating insight. So, Kuldeep, maybe just going back to what I had mentioned at the start of the interview, most pension and retirement planning products are geared towards salaried individuals or people with more regularized streams of income. So, how can this be extended to population groups that perhaps do not have such regular streams of income, maybe such as gig workers or other informal sector workers, some of whom you've already worked with as well?
Yes. So see, I can give you a very first-hand experience there. So we started from there. I've seen the population. So for example, I might not, I figure out something. So I might not have adequate retirement savings, but I will have some retirement savings when I get old, let's say, right? But my maid might not be in the same position. or my, security guard might be not in the same position. They need it more. And that's how we started, right? They needed more. So it's built from them first. From a business, that's from a personal perspective or impact perspective, that is great. From a business perspective, that requires a huge amount of capital and amount of workforce to be deployed so that you make some sense from a business perspective at scale. And because the ticket size is too low on that part. So from a business perspective, it made sense, you figure out people in the gig workforce who are making much more money. So their income segment is higher, let's say. You start off with them and then eventually move towards the people who are, lower income segment. So we started off with that, learned a lesson saying that, for one person, you need to spend 1.5 hours, figure out a lot of issues. So one of the issues were the Aadhaar card was not linked to their own phone number. It was linked to someone else. So he got, let's say we do want to do a KYC. The message went to something somewhere else, right? The passbook first page was blank. So you can't read anything on that part. So when you're building something, you don't prepare yourself saying that these might be the problems in lower income segment or the gig workforce side, but you need a huge capital to do that. And eventually my heart lies there. Though my, mind says ki boss, figure out this first, build a business here, build up a capital, have a workforce to basically look at scale. But it's tough to build a business around a low ticket size. You have to build it around a high scale kind of a part. And that requires initial capital, to be honest. But that's where the impact is high. And we will move towards that. We're starting off with a gig workforce, higher income segment where we can look at flexibility is the key thing, where you don't have to save per month. Let's say premiums are there, right? Like LIC premiums or something. You have to save per month. For a freelancer, that's not possible. He might just save once a year. Like he just put money and then be sorted with it, right? And they might want to withdraw earlier as well. They might want to retire early as well. So that kind of a kick we started off with, but eventually 3 to 4 years down, the line, you'll see we working with these kind of, let's say, farmers platform or platform working with farmers, and we build with them kind of a partnership, kind of a role, and then go towards farmers. Go with the big factories, or let's say the association of glass workers, not just individual people, and then move towards glass workers. Maybe women workers. So some NGOs who are working in women worker segment, and then move towards, women gig workforce kind of a part. So it has to be done through partnership, but at scale part. So I think that is my key learnings. Though I want to do it from the very first day, but something which is, when you are in the business, then you learn a lot about it, how to actually do it. So it's just not empathy that works. It has to be a scalable mode there on that part. So, but eventually we'll get there. That's how we want to imagine. I said the Pension India, the pension app, and that will be built when you cover everyone. India is just not the high income segment. India is just not the salaried people. So when you build a India ka pension app, it has to be the gig workforce as well. My maid, my security guard as well.
Great, Kuldeep. I think your point on working with collectives is something that resonates a lot with me as well. So one final question, Kuldeep. So studies have often pointed out that humans have difficulty evaluating short-term rewards over long-term goals. And
Sure.
pensions and retirement planning often require a significant amount of discipline and habit building. So how can this be addressed in order to make these retirement planning decisions more attractive for young people who may be thinking about?
Okay, so we focus at PensionBox, right? So we know that people in a young workforce part, it's not ideal to start with. So you have to figure out a sweet spot, right? Like where do you start? So even if I spend $1 million telling them about, ki you plan your retirement, but their thought process when they start a career, or even for us itself, right? Like you, me, everyone, when we start off our career, we are just thinking about the next weekend, where you want to go and party, right? Where you want to go in the next trip. These are the two things which we have in mind, and we are very heavy on it at that point. So for the first couple of years, that's not the ideal spot to spend money or awareness part. I'm saying journal way. There are people in early stage. We have people at PensionBox who are as early as 21-year-old. So there are people who does that, but in journal summarized way, if I say that, the mindset here is more towards spending in the early couple of years. They want to buy a house. They want house, like let's say they want to buy a car, or let's say a bike or something. So spending is much more there. I think the turning point is something which is we identified as a 28 year is the number. So as soon as you turn 28, chances of you managing your savings versus credit is much more better, right? So 28 is the turning point. So we focus people above 28 and above, where you figure it out. You have done your, so how many years of party you will do, right? Like you do 5 years or let's say 6 years. Then you figure it out. This is not everything. You start figuring out other things, and then your income become taxable as well. You start paying high taxes. So pension savings become tax savings on that part. But the way to cater to a younger audience here is not telling them to plan their own retirement. So that's what I think next year when we do that, which is it's not figuring out, telling them ki you figure out, let's say, your own retirement, but instead of just telling them ki boss, help your parents that. So you might be tech savvy, your parents might not be tech savvy. So learn together. So here is not about saying that you save today, you'll end up early on. So they might not be kick with that. They might be kick, but not exactly. Like not a people will do that. But if you look at the numbers saying that you can actually help your parents, teach them if they are in their 40s, teach them how to use PensionBox. Then they can engage. And then in the process, they'll learn as well. So if when the turning point comes, they'll automatically come to the platform where they can figure out their future that way. So I would say that PensionBox is not focusing as of now in the young people, because young people are focusing somewhere else. So there's no point running behind them if they're not running towards you. Right. So they keep running towards like far off. Like you're running towards them, they're running somewhere else. They should run towards you so that you reach a point where you meet and then sell that solution. So that's a kind of extent.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take, Kuldeep. And I guess family is the bedrock of Indian society. So that's a good sort of way to start. And I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this episode of D91 Labs Idea Series. Thank you so much, Kuldeep, for all those fascinating insights on this topic. We wish you and the entire team at PensionBox the best for the journey ahead.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the series, and I think it's very impactful. And I think it's always a pleasure for me to talk about what we are building, because at the end of the day, it's a socially connected problem. We might need it one way or another.
Absolutely. That's a great way to end this.